Get out!
Revenge Files with Nora. File 4, Megan. When Ryan Foster presented my operational framework to the board, he forgot one critical thing. Even though he put his name on every slide of a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation, there was something he couldn't change. Every email, every draft, every timestamp proving I built it was with me. 12 years of process improvements. 47 client implementations. A system that saved Crestwood partners $11 million annually, but the board applauded him. The CEO shook his hand. They promoted him to senior VP that afternoon. This cheap scenario turned into reality before my eyes, and there was more. They fired me the next morning, but here's what Ryan didn't know. I document everything, every revision, every late-night email, every version-controlled file with my digital signature embedded in the metadata. By the time I was done, Ryan had lost his job, his reputation, and his corner office. The board didn't just believe me. They had no choice, because documentation doesn't lie, and I had over a terabyte of proof. Here's what happened. I started at Crestwood Partners 12 years ago when the company operated out of a cramped office near Penn Station. Back then, we had 19 employees, one shared printer, and a coffee machine that made sounds like a dying accordion every morning. The building smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee, that particular Manhattan office smell that seeps into everything. My title was Operations Coordinator. My actual job was everything else. I built the client onboarding system from scratch, designed the project tracking database, created the resource allocation framework that became the backbone of every consulting engagement we ran. I did it between answering phones, scheduling conference rooms, and explaining to senior partners how to attach files to emails. Nobody asked me to build those systems. Actually, it was completely instinctive. I just saw chaos and organized it. That's who I am. That's who I've always been. Within 3 years, Crestwood grew to 60 employees. Within 7, we hit 200. The partners bought corner offices in Midtown, glass walls overlooking 6th Avenue. They hired executive assistants and junior analysts. They stopped remembering who built the infrastructure they were standing on, but I remembered. And more importantly, I documented. Every system I created lived in a shared drive with my name in the file path. Every process improvement had a changelog with timestamps. Every client implementation was logged in a master spreadsheet I maintained personally. I kept backups on an external drive at home, updated weekly, plus an automatic Backblaze cloud backup that synced every night, belt and suspenders. In consulting, documentation is survival. I wasn't paranoid. I was professional. A professional who had experienced how forgetful and ungrateful people could be. That's exactly why, in consulting, documentation is essential for survival. Do you agree? My apartment in Brooklyn Heights became my second office. A one-bedroom with hardwood floors that creaked in winter, a view of the Manhattan skyline through windows that needed replacing, and enough bookshelves to qualify as a small library. $2,800 a month for 650 square feet, which counted as reasonable in the city. I'd moved there after my divorce 5 years ago when I needed space to rebuild. The divorce taught me something important. When people leave, they take their version of the story with them. My ex-husband told our friends I was cold, distant, married to my work. Maybe he was right about the last part, but every story has two sides, and I learned your defense against someone else's narrative has no real value. The only real defense is documentation. Receipts, evidence, comparing what someone claims with what actually happened. I've started applying this lesson to my work as well. I can explain the basis for my preparedness for the events I would experience with Ryan Foster in this way, or with people like him. Of course, I first needed to understand what kind of person he was. Have you ever given someone too many chances before getting badly betrayed? He arrived 8 months ago with the kind of confidence that only comes from never having been told no. MB from Wharton, 3 years at McKinsey. Even his teeth gleamed with an artificial confidence. I'd done my research after his first week. He'd left McKinsey under circumstances nobody discussed publicly. His LinkedIn showed a gap of 4 months before Crestwood. In consulting circles, gaps mean something. Bradley Thornton, our CEO, introduced him at the all-hands meeting like he was presenting a prize-winning horse. They'd met at a Wharton alumni event, apparently. Old boys network, still functioning in the 21st century, but this was the first of his suspicious aspects. Everyone, please welcome Ryan Foster. He'll be leading our Operational Excellence Initiative. Ryan has an incredible vision for streamlining our delivery processes. I sat in the third row, coffee going cold, watching Ryan smile and wave. Operational Excellence Initiative. That was my territory. I'd spent 12 years building operational excellence. Now some McKinsey guy was going to lead an initiative on it. I told myself it was fine, he'd focus on strategy. I'd keep running the actual systems, we'd complement each other. That's not what happened. How optimistic I was. Ryan's first month was a listening tour. He sat in meetings, nodded thoughtfully, and took notes on a leather-bound journal that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. He asked questions. Lots of questions. Tell me about the client onboarding flow. How does resource allocation work? What's the logic behind the project tracking system? I answered everything. Showed him the dashboards, walked him through the databases. Explained the frameworks I'd built over the years. He thanked me each time, called me invaluable, said he couldn't do his job without my institutional knowledge. Part of me was flattered. Here was this polished executive treating my work like it mattered, asking follow-up questions, taking detailed notes. I believed him. That was my mistake. By month 3, Ryan started presenting to the partners, quarterly reviews, strategy sessions, board updates. He'd stand at the front of the room with slides I'd never seen, explaining systems I'd built using language I didn't recognize, proprietary methodology, scalable operational architecture, integrated delivery ecosystem. The partners nodded like they were watching a TED talk. Bradley Thornton called it visionary, but what they heard was just the information Ryan had first learned from me and noted down. I sat in the back, watching my work get rebranded in real time. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe this was just how corporate communication worked. Maybe executives always took credit for their team's work. Or maybe I needed to confront my own shortcoming in presenting what I knew in a cool way. But deep down, I knew the difference between team credit and theft. Ryan never mentioned my name. Never acknowledged who built the frameworks he was explaining. He used vague terms like "we developed" and "the team implemented," but "we" and "the team" never included me. I had become invisible in my own story. I raised it once, casually after a meeting when the conference room had emptied. Ryan, I noticed the resource allocation section was based on the system I created years ago. Maybe I could present that part next time, provide some historical context. He smiled, that blinding smile that I later learned meant nothing. Megan, I appreciate your contributions. Truly, but the board wants to see leadership. They want to know who's driving the vision. Let's keep you focused on execution. That's where you shine, execution. He made it sound like a compliment. It wasn't. I should have pushed back harder, should have documented the conversation, should have sent a follow-up email establishing my concerns in writing. I did none of those things. I was still believing in the system, or in human dignity. The credit theft wasn't sudden. It was gradual, methodical, almost elegant in its cruelty. Ryan absorbed my work into his narrative one presentation at a time. He renamed my systems, added buzzwords, removed any trace of my involvement. I felt like my existence was being erased along with my system, turning to dust. The client onboarding system became the Foster intake protocol. The project tracking database became the Crestwood delivery dashboard, with Ryan listed as the architect. My resource allocation framework, the one I'd refined over 6 years and 47 client implementations, became the Operational Excellence Matrix, featured prominently in Ryan's performance review as his signature achievement. I watched my legacy disappear behind a wall of corporate jargon and strategic positioning. I had figured out his intentions and working methods, but I didn't panic. I didn't confront him. I didn't go to HR with complaints that would be dismissed as jealousy or resistance to change. Instead, I started building a different kind of file. Mine was digital, organized by date, by project, by evidence type. A folder structure that would make any lawyer proud. I should have been ahead of him, not lagging behind his steps. Emails with timestamps showing when I first proposed each system. Draft documents with my name in the author field. Version histories proving I was the original creator. Screenshot after screenshot of Ryan's presentations overlaid with my original files, highlighting the identical structures, the copied language, the stolen logic. I called it the proof folder. Nobody knew it existed. Not Ryan. Not Bradley. Not even Priya Sharma, my closest friend at the company. Not because I doubted Priya's intentions, but because even a small detail mentioned in casual conversation could have ended my professional life, or even hers. That was a risk I couldn't take. Actually, she had been warning me about Ryan for months. "Megan, he's building a case against you. I've seen this before at my old firm. He takes credit, establishes himself as the expert, then pushes out anyone who threatens his narrative. You're the threat. I know what he's doing. Then why aren't you fighting back? Because I'm not ready yet. I'm building something." She studied my face. "Whatever it is, build it fast." I didn't tell her what it was. Not then. The proof folder was mine alone, my insurance policy, my weapon. The firing came on a Tuesday. October weather in Manhattan, that specific gray that makes everything feel inevitable. Morning rain had left the sidewalks slick, and the subway had been delayed twice. I arrived at my desk already irritated. I was reviewing client metrics when Allison from HR appeared at my cubicle. She had that expression, the one HR people practice in mirrors, professional sympathy. Practiced regret. "Megan, do you have a few minutes?" Conference room C, no context. No warning. Just the calendar invite of doom. As I walked to the conference room, I remember hearing the irritating sound of the struggling photocopier. It was trying to send me a message, it seems. Ryan was already seated inside, arms crossed, looking like someone forced him to attend his own intervention. Allison sat across from him with a folder. Bradley was on speakerphone, too busy for an in-person termination apparently. "Megan, thanks for joining us." Bradley's voice crackled through the speaker, distant and corporate. "This is difficult, but we've decided to restructure the operations team. Your position is being eliminated effective today." I stared at the phone. At Ryan. At Allison's carefully neutral expression. Eliminated. 12 years. 47 implementations. 11 million in documented savings. Eliminated. Ryan shifted in his chair. The leather squeaked. "It's not about performance, Megan. The company is moving in a new direction. We need to consolidate leadership under one vision. A fake vision built entirely on my work." Allison slid the folder across the table. Standard separation terms, 4-week severance. Cobra information, an ND that probably violated 3 labor laws. Her pen clicked once, twice. I didn't touch it, so we're starting. I said to myself, "Ryan," I said, voice steadier than I expected, "the operational excellence matrix. You presented it to the board last month as your creation. That's my resource allocation framework. I built it years ago. I have the original files." He didn't flinch. "I don't know what you're referring to. The matrix was developed as part of my strategic initiative. And the Foster intake protocol, the one with your name literally in the title? Company resources, Megan. We all contribute. But we don't all get fired," I thought to myself. His smile flickered just slightly. Telling. The first crack I'd ever seen. Allison cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should focus on the transition details." I stood up. Left the folder on the table. Walked out without signing anything. Ryan called after me. "Megan, let's be professional about this." I didn't turn around. I had something better than their severance package. I had over a terabyte of proof. At that moment, I understood better that they were amateurs focused on flashy presentation techniques, and they had no idea what was coming. The subway ride home felt like moving through fog. Bodies pressed around me, the L train screeching through tunnels, someone's headphones bleeding bass into the silence. I couldn't feel any of it. 12 years. Gone in 14 minutes. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in that sickly yellow glow unique to underground transit. A woman next to me was crying into her phone. Someone else was laughing too loudly. The city kept moving, indifferent to the fact that my professional identity had just been erased. I thought about how many strangers I didn't know had gone through something similar while I just carried on with my life. I made it to my apartment before the shaking started. Not crying. Something deeper. The kind of tremor that comes from holding steady for too long while everything falls apart. I sat on my couch, hands gripping the armrests, staring at the Manhattan skyline through my window. The same view I'd looked at every morning for 5 years. The same city that suddenly felt different. Smaller. Colder. Harsher. Oliver, my cat, jumped onto my lap, headbutted my chin, refused to leave even when I didn't respond. Animals know. Part of me wanted to call someone, my sister in Boston, my college roommate in San Francisco, anyone who would tell me this was unfair, that I deserved better, that Ryan was a monster. But it wasn't the right time to satisfy my need for validation. It was time for strategy. I got up, poured myself a glass of wine, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The proof folder was right where I'd left it, over a terabyte of documentation organized into 17 subfolders, emails, drafts, version histories, screenshots, client testimonials mentioning my name specifically, performance reviews from years ago praising systems Ryan now claimed as his own. I started scrolling. There it was. An email from 6 years earlier. Subject line, Resource Allocation Framework, Draft 1. I kept scrolling. A few years later. Project Tracking Database, version 3.0. My name in the author field. My edits in the revision history. My logic in every formula. 2 years before Ryan arrived. Client onboarding process. Final documentation. Attached to an email I'd sent to the entire leadership team. 12 pages of process flows I'd designed personally. The previous year. A performance review where Bradley himself wrote, "Megan's operational systems are the backbone of our consulting practice. She has built infrastructure that will serve Crestwood for years to come." Ryan had renamed every single one, taken credit for every single one, and nobody had questioned it because nobody remembered who built the infrastructure they were standing on. I closed the laptop, sat in the dark, thought about my options. Option 1, go quietly, take the severance. Sign the NDA, find another job, pretend 12 years didn't matter, the safe choice. The professional choice, and the choice that would leave Ryan's lie intact forever. Option 2, fight, not with anger. Not with accusations, not with HR complaints that would be buried and dismissed. Fight with evidence. Saturday morning arrived with pale autumn light filtering through my bedroom curtains. I hadn't slept much, but I wasn't tired. Something had shifted overnight. The shock had burned off, crystallized into something sharper. I made coffee. Strong, French press. The way I always made it when I was working on something important. Logic said, let it go. Fighting would be exhausting, expensive, uncertain. Ryan had the company's backing. I had a termination letter. Emotion said, he stole 12 years of your work. He erased you from your own accomplishments. He smiled slyly while doing it. I sat at my kitchen table and I called Priya. She picked up on the second ring, voice still morning rough. Heard what happened. The internal Slack is a mess. People are confused. What's Ryan saying? That you left voluntarily. Pursuing other opportunities. He did a whole announcement at the team meeting yesterday. Very gracious. Very fake, I laughed. It came out cold. Priya, I need your help, name it. Do you still have contacts at Sterling Industries? Pause. The client that just signed a 3-year renewal with Crestwood. Yeah, I know their VP of Operations, Catherine Brooks. Why? Because I'm about to prove that everything Ryan presented to them was my work, and I want them to hear it directly from me. Priya exhaled slowly. Megan, that's aggressive. You sure you want to go there? Once you start this, you can't undo it. Crestwood will come after you hard. I looked at my laptop, at 12 years of documentation organized meticulously in folders labeled by date and evidence type. I've never been more sure of anything. Sunday evening, I sat at my kitchen table with printed copies of everything. 63 pages of emails laid out chronologically. Draft documents with metadata highlighted. Screenshots showing Ryan's presentations side by side with my original files. The comparison was damning. Ryan's Operational Excellence Matrix, presented to the board in September. My Resource Allocation Framework, emailed to Bradley 6 years earlier. Identical structure. Identical formulas. Identical decision trees. Different name, different author credit. Ryan's Foster Intake Protocol. My client onboarding system from a few years back. Same process flows. Same logic gates. His name inserted where mine had been removed. I wasn't just building a case. I was excavating the truth from under 8 months of strategic plagiarism. The question wasn't whether I could prove it. The evidence was overwhelming. The question was who to tell first. This decision was the most important starting point for me to implement my strategy. Part of me wanted to go straight to the board, demand a meeting, present the evidence and watch Ryan's smile finally crack, but I knew how corporate boards worked. They protect CEOs, and CEOs protect the people they promoted. The system would close ranks. Hire lawyers protect their image. Clients, though, Clients had paid for expertise they thought was Ryan's. Clients had signed renewals based on his presentations. Clients had a right to know they'd been misled about who actually built the systems running their operations. My phone buzzed. Text from Priya. Sterling's VP of Operations wants to meet. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Her name is Catherine Brooks, she said. She has concerns about the Crestwood engagement and wants to discuss transition planning. I smiled. For the first time since Tuesday, genuinely smiled. Some people would have gone to HR, filed a formal complaint, trusted the system. But the system had failed, leaving me disappointed. What do you think? I wasn't going to ask permission to tell the truth. I was going to present evidence. And I was going to start with the clients who thought Ryan Foster was a genius. That morning, I woke up at 5. Spent an hour organizing my documents one final time. Checked my reflection in the mirror and told myself, you built those systems, and today you prove it. Monday morning, 9:45 a.m. I walked into the Sterling Industries building on Park Avenue wearing my best blazer, heels that added 2 inches I didn't need but wanted anyway, and carrying a leather portfolio thick with evidence. The lobby was marble and glass, that particular Manhattan corporate aesthetic that whispers money without saying the word. Security waved me through after I gave Catherine's name. Catherine met me on the 32nd floor. 50s, silver-streaked hair, handshake firm enough to establish authority without turning into a contest. She'd been in operations longer than I had. She knew what authentic expertise looked like. Megan Sullivan, she said, I've heard your name before, from the old Crestwood team, before Ryan arrived. That's what I'm here to discuss. We sat in a glass-walled conference room, Manhattan spread out below us in grays and silvers. She ordered coffee for both of us without asking what I wanted. The coffee came not in paper cups bought in bulk, but in hand-decorated ceramic mugs. Different universe from Crestwood's break room. For the next 2 hours, I walked Catherine through everything. The emails, the drafts, the version histories, every system Ryan had presented as his own, overlaid with my original documents showing identical structures, identical logic, different names. She listened without interrupting. Occasionally, she'd ask me to pause while she took notes in handwriting that looked like it came from a different century. Precise. Deliberate. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. Raising her eyebrows and shaking her head, she simply said, "This is a scam." I nodded. Yes. And Crestwood's board knows they fired me for being redundant. Less than a week ago. Catherine's expression didn't change, but something hardened behind her eyes. We signed a 3-year renewal based on Ryan's capabilities, based on his systems. His expertise, you're telling me those systems are yours, every single one. She picked up her phone. Get me Bradley Thornton at Crestwood. Tell him it's urgent. That call lasted 12 minutes. I could only hear Catherine's side, but it was enough. Bradley, we need to discuss the Foster situation. I have documentation. Extensive documentation. This isn't a conversation you want to have publicly. I'd suggest you call an emergency board meeting. She hung up without saying goodbye. By Tuesday afternoon, Catherine had shared my evidence with Sterling's legal team. By Wednesday, they'd contacted their other Crestwood vendors to compare notes. It turned out I wasn't the only one with concerns. Hartwell Group, another major Crestwood client worth $4 million annually, had noticed inconsistencies in Ryan's presentations. Their operations director had flagged issues months ago, but couldn't prove anything without inside documentation. Vanguard Equity had requested specific documentation from Ryan 3 times. He'd stalled, deflected, blamed IT delays. Now they knew why. The clients started talking to each other, and then they started talking to Crestwood's board. Thursday morning, my phone rang at 7:30 a.m., a number I didn't recognize. Miss Sullivan, this is Patricia Huang. I'm the chair of Crestwood Partners Board of Directors. We need to speak. I sat up straighter. What about, I think you know. Can you meet us tomorrow? 9 a.m., our offices, I'll be there. That night I couldn't sleep. I'd spent 12 years being invisible, building systems everyone used and nobody credited, watching my work get absorbed into other people's narratives. Tomorrow, they would finally see me. Friday, 9 a.m. I walked into Crestwood Partners for the first time since they fired me. Same building. Same elevators. Same artificial plant in the lobby that had been there since I started 12 years ago. Different purpose. The receptionist, Mariana, looked confused when she saw me. Miss Sullivan, I thought you'd left the company. I smiled. I'm here for a meeting with the board. Her eyebrows rose, but she was too professional to comment. Patricia Huang waited in the executive conference room. 50s, silver hair perfectly styled, the kind of presence that commands attention without raising her voice. 3 other board members sat beside her, legal pads ready. Ryan was notably absent. Miss Sullivan, thank you for coming. I sat across from them, placed my portfolio on the table. Where's Ryan? Mr. Foster has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Something loosened in my chest. We've reviewed the documentation you provided to Sterling Industries. Patricia's voice was calm, measured. We've also received communications from Hartwell Group and Vanguard Equity expressing concerns about the authenticity of Mr. Foster's work. I nodded. Waited. We'd like to understand the full scope of the issue, and we'd like to discuss potential remediation. The next 3 hours were a detailed walkthrough of everything Ryan had stolen, every system, every framework, every presentation. I showed them original emails with timestamps, draft documents with my name in the author field, version histories that proved I was the creator and Ryan was the plagiarist. They asked questions. I answered them. They took notes. I provided copies. By noon, Patricia Huang leaned back in her chair. Miss Sullivan, it appears we made a significant error in judgment, in terminating your employment and in promoting Mr. Foster. Appears so. We'd like to discuss terms. As I sat there, something shifted in the room. The power dynamic that had crushed me just days ago was now tilting in my direction. I could see it in how they leaned forward, how they chose their words carefully. The negotiation took another 2 hours. Here's what we agreed on. Full reinstatement with back pay and a promotion to Senior Director of Operations. A formal acknowledgement that the Operational Excellence Matrix, the Foster Intake Protocol, and the Crestwood Delivery Dashboard were my creations, not Ryan's. Renaming of those systems to reflect my authorship. A settlement for wrongful termination that I'm not permitted to disclose, but it was substantial. We can call this a complete victory. A victory that came after 12 years. And Ryan Foster? His employment was terminated effective immediately. No severance. No reference. The board cited material misrepresentation of qualifications and work product. His LinkedIn went private that afternoon. I checked. The industry grapevine filled in the rest. Ryan had tried to spin the story, telling former colleagues he'd left to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities. That lasted 3 days before someone leaked the board minutes. Material misrepresentation. Intellectual property theft. Termination for cause. His Wharton network went quiet. McKinsey connections stopped returning calls. In consulting, reputation is currency, and Ryan had declared bankruptcy. Part of me, a small part, felt something that wasn't quite satisfaction. He'd been in over his head from the start, promoted beyond his competence because he looked the part and knew the right people. But the system had tried to make him successful through theft rather than merit. And who knows who else? Catherine Brooks called me that evening. The Sterling team wants to keep working with Crestwood, but only if you're running operations. I smiled. Tell them that can be arranged. 3 months later, I stood in front of the Crestwood leadership team for the first quarterly review since my reinstatement. Same conference room where Ryan used to present my work as his own. Same partners who used to applaud his buzzwords. Different dynamic. I didn't use fancy terminology. Didn't rebrand anything with my name for ego's sake. Just presented the systems I'd built, with my name clearly attributed, using the same language I'd used for 12 years. Proprietary methodology became my resource allocation framework. Scalable operational architecture became the database I designed years ago. Integrated delivery ecosystem became the client onboarding process I created when we had 19 employees. When I finished, Patricia Huang stood up. Led the applause. This, she said, is what authentic expertise looks like. Ryan Foster's name became a cautionary tale in consulting circles. Someone wrote about the situation on LinkedIn, disguising the names but including enough details that industry insiders knew. It got picked up by blogs. The comment sections filled with similar stories. People who'd had their work stolen. People who'd been erased from their own contributions. There were so many of us, it turned out. My inbox started filling with messages from strangers I had never met. Most of them, though not all, were women. The details were different, but the method and purpose were the same. credit theft, and erasure. All of their own systems had been slowly and methodically taken over and used against them. The Ryan mentality and sneaky methods appeared in every story. I responded to every single one. Document everything. Keep copies outside of company systems. Timestamp your contributions. Build your proof folder before you need it. Some of them wrote back months later to tell me it worked. One woman sent me a photo of herself in her new corner office with the caption, "Proof folder worked. Thanks for the advice." That message sits in a folder on my desktop now. I look at it on hard days. Priya and I met for coffee 3 weeks after my reinstatement. You know what impressed me most? She said, "You didn't get emotional. You didn't make it personal. You just presented evidence." To be honest, I'm not sure I could remain as cool-headed as you did under the same circumstances. I sipped my coffee, watched the pedestrians passing outside, everyone rushing somewhere. You, on the other hand, understood Ryan's intentions from the very beginning thanks to your instincts and warned me. We raised our cups to instincts and evidence. I still work at Crestwood Partners. Same building where I started 12 years ago. Different office. Corner now with a view of 6th Avenue, glass walls I once envied from my cubicle. The systems I built are still running, still managing resources, tracking projects, onboarding clients, but now they have my name attached. Sullivan Resource Framework, Sullivan Delivery Dashboard, Sullivan Intake Protocol. Nobody forgets who built them anymore. Here's what I learned. Evidence is more convincing than feelings. Feelings can be dismissed as jealousy, as bitterness, as a woman being too emotional. Evidence just sits there. Undeniable. If you've built something valuable, document it. If someone takes credit for your work, don't get angry. Get organized. They called me redundant. They called my knowledge obsolete. They tried to erase 12 years of contributions with a 15-minute presentation and a termination letter. But documentation doesn't care about corporate narratives. It doesn't care about polished smiles, or MBA credentials, or who plays golf with whom. It just tells the truth. And the truth, when properly organized and time-stamped, is impossible to argue with. My name is Megan Sullivan. I'm the Senior Director of Operations who built the systems that made this company what it is. They forgot that once. They won't forget again. Last month, I ran into Bradley Thornton at a conference. He told me I was the best thing that ever happened to Crestwood's operations. I thanked him, didn't remind him that he'd approved my termination. Some things don't need to be said, but I noticed the discomfort in his eyes, the memory of his mistake still fresh. I wondered if he rehearsed that compliment beforehand, knowing we might cross paths. Corporate guilt has a way of making people generous with words they should have said years ago. If someone is taking credit for your work right now, start building your proof folder today. Emails, drafts, version histories, screenshots with timestamps, because when they try to erase you, and they will try, you'll need evidence, not feelings, not memories, not the hope that someone will remember your contributions. Evidence. Build the proof, protect your work, and when the time comes, present it without apology. The truth doesn't need volume. It just needs documentation. Do you agree? Share your thoughts in the comments. The full pink file playlist's waiting, or discover other color files for more office revenge. See you in the next file.